50 years ago, Sgt. Pepper, maybe the greatest album ever. Rolling Stone says #1 in history. One of the top Beatle experts in the world.
Here's the song. Hear it?
All right, thank you very much. On November 24th, 1966, after basically being sick of and retiring from touring and taking a 3-month vacation, the Beatles went into Studio 2 at Abbey Road.
Over the next 5 months, they recorded songs which would become what many, including Rolling Stone magazine, called the greatest rock album ever.
Sergeant, go ahead.
Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was released in the United States 50 years ago. Yesterday, today, or tomorrow, we're going to discuss that. It was the #1 album on the Billboard charts for 15 weeks and won 4 Grammys, including Best Album, the first album ever to do that. The music you are listening to right now, part of the 50th anniversary remix that's just been released. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. I know I'm messing it up. I don't care. I'm sorry, I know you do.
People are so overwhelmed by the production, they don't hear it. Look at that. All right, joining us right now is an old friend, Martin Lewis, a humorist, a producer, and one of the go-to Beatle historians. Martin, good to see you. For a good reason today, huh?
Indeed, a happy day it is, 50 years ago today.
Today. But the controversy is why? Tomorrow, yesterday, why?
Well, in Britain it was released on June 1st because Britain is the capital of the universe, and in America, 1 day behind. The colony released it 1 day behind.
The colony.
Hey, Martin, if we go back in history, the Beatles were sick of being the Beatles, basically, at this point.
Yeah, mainly they were unhappy with live performance because, the technology of the day, they couldn't reproduce their sound. They could barely hear themselves, and the girls were screaming, so they weren't enjoying live performance.
Horrendous to have all those girls screaming at you.
It gets tired after a time.
Yeah.
So then they decided they wanted to go back into the studio. They loved recording music, and they came up with something that really revolutionized things. Up until Sgt. Pepper, most recordings were really like a photograph of your live performance. You may have embellished it a little bit and put on a string section, but it was really what you could do live. Yeah. But knowing that they were never going to perform live again, they felt free to do something different. And so they turned recording more into painting, like where you can have collage and montage. You could do different textures and overlay things. You could never reproduce it live, but that didn't matter. So in being freed of the constraints of live performance, they were able to create a new art form.
That's really neat. The cover. Now look, this is why the jacket, the cover is so iconic. And there's so many different faces, and this has been part of the discussion of this is part of what made it what it is.
Indeed. Well, they wanted something as special on the cover art as the music inside, and I commend you on your jacket, by the way, and by the power vested in me by Her Majesty the Queen, I ordain you into the British Army as Lieutenant Liz.
Thank you very much. I don't believe in that monarchy, but okay, go on. I just joking.
So, so the cover art was, of course, part of it, but the most important thing was to use the recording studio in ways that hadn't been done before.
Yes.
And there was something else that was really unusual about the record. The Beatles were always very forward-looking in their music. They were constantly breaking new barriers. They wanted to come up with different ways of putting melody and harmony and rhythm and lyrics together. But as a juxtaposition to that, their lyrics and subject matter on this record were backwards looking. They were looking back to the past with great affection. So though the music is psychedelic, the lyrics are about...
When that album came out, I learned a lot about British music hall, humor, sound, vaudeville. It was very, very old-time British stuff.
It was eclectic because they had affection for what had happened in the past. So there's a lot of Victoriana, the whole idea of Sgt. Pepper, a military band or people from a brass band, and the songs, they have that vaudeville or musical, as we called it.
Here's the ultimate question. This is the ultimate question. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, about LSD or no?
It was not about LSD. It was a wonderful coincidence, but and Julian Lennon is a dear friend of mine. Julian was 5 years old. He brought home a drawing that he'd done of his friend in class, and his dad said, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, that's Lucy in the sky with diamonds." You know, a child's drawing. He was 4 or 5 years old.
Now, did Julian tell you that? It was the
No. This was John said this from the get-go, but Julian remembers. But when I've been my friendship with Julian, I've asked him about it.
I must change the subject a little bit, because now there is a fifth Beatle. Who's the fifth Beatle?
That's has been bandied around for so much, but Paul, and I think he's a reasonable authority, says it was Brian Epstein. And the Beatles on Sgt. Pepper, on Sgt. Pepper, on Sgt.
Now
Pepper.
that album's really going to go through the roof now.
That will go down a lot on eBay.
My goodness.
On this album, the Beatles were well served by 3 people. First, George Martin, their enlightened producer, because he didn't dictate what they should do, he nurtured out of them. They had an amazing recording engineer called Jeff Emmerich, who created all these new sounds, and their manager, Brian Epstein, who was enlightened enough to say, do what you want, not repeat yourselves. He didn't care about the money. His attitude was do what is best.
Martin Lewis, thank you for coming by.
My
50th
great pleasure.
anniversary. We'll see you on the 100th, okay?
I still think it's about LSD. I'm not buying it yet. Bizarre love story with my friends. It's got a new twist. I get high with a little help. What's your favorite song?
A Day in the Life. Lucy is lovely, but A Day in the Life is the ultimate.
How about When I'm 64?
I am 64, so I like that.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it just, 64 is not old anymore.
But I